He lost everything in a single afternoon, but the house he came back to refused to stay silent. The first thing Rex did wasn't greet him, wasn't wag his tail, wasn't even look up with the kind of relief you'd expect from a dog who hadn't seen his owner in weeks. Instead, the German shepherd stood frozen in the doorway, ears high, body tense, staring past Ethan like something inside the house had been waiting longer than either of them. Ethan Cole stepped in slowly, boots dragging faint dust across the warped wooden floor. The air inside carried that stale mix of damp wood, old insulation, and something colder underneath, something metallic that didn't belong in a place untouched for years. He exhaled, long and tired, setting his single duffel bag down beside the wall, where the paint had peeled into thin curling strips like the house itself was shedding its past. This was all he had left now. No bank account worth mentioning. No marriage. No clean ending. Just a name on papers that had been signed too fast, and a silence that followed him home. Outside, the late afternoon sky stretched wide and pale over the quiet stretch of land. Nothing but open field and a broken fence line running along the edge of the property. 2 acres his father once called freedom. Now it felt more like distance, the kind that kept people away and truths buried. Rex took 2 slow steps forward, nose low, scanning the ground. His paws made no sound against the old boards, but his breathing shifted, shallow, focused, like a working dog back on a mission he hadn't been given. Ethan noticed it immediately. That change, subtle but unmistakable. The same posture Rex had shown overseas when something wasn't right, when the air itself felt wrong. "Easy, boy," Ethan murmured, voice rough from too many nights without sleep, but Rex didn't respond, didn't even flick an ear. His gaze locked toward the far end of the hallway where the light thinned into shadow. Ethan followed his line of sight. The hallway stretched narrow and dim, framed with old family photos still hanging crooked on the walls, faces he hadn't looked at in years, smiles from a life that didn't exist anymore. He felt that familiar pressure behind his eyes, not quite pain, not quite memory, just something unfinished, like trying to recall. A dream that slipped away the moment you reached for it. The floor creaked under his weight as he moved deeper inside, each step slow, cautious, not from fear but from instinct, the kind that never really leaves a man once it's been carved into him. He paused halfway down the hall, noticing the boards beneath his feet didn't sound right, not hollow exactly, but uneven, like they'd been disturbed and put back without care. He shifted his weight slightly, listening. The faintest difference in tone echoed up, subtle, but enough. Rex's head snapped toward the spot instantly, a low rumble building in his chest, not aggressive, not loud, just a warning that came from somewhere deeper than training. Ethan's eyes narrowed, scanning the floor. The edges of one plank sat just a fraction higher than the others, barely visible unless you knew what to look for. And he did, because war teaches you to notice what doesn't belong long before it becomes a problem. He crouched slowly, fingers brushing against the wood. It felt newer than the rest, smoother, cleaner, like it had been replaced not long ago, but that didn't make sense. No one had been here. No one should have been here. Behind him, Rex shifted closer, standing almost shoulder to shoulder with him now, his body still, breath steady, eyes fixed, waiting, not for a command, but for permission. And in that quiet moment, Ethan felt it. Not fear, not yet, but something heavier. A realization beginning to take shape beneath the surface, something about the divorce, the speed of it, the way everything had slipped through his hands like it had already been decided before he even understood what was happening. He swallowed hard, glancing once more at the floor, then at the hallway behind him. The house wasn't just old, it was holding something, and whatever it was, Rex had already found the first crack in it. The board did not come loose easily. It resisted at first like it had something to protect. Ethan pressed harder, fingers digging along the edge until the wood shifted with a dry crack that echoed faintly through the hallway. Rex stepped back half a pace, but did not break focus. His eyes locked on the opening as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. Ethan lifted the plank slowly, careful, controlled, the way he had been trained to move when uncertainty lived just inches away. Beneath it there was darkness, not deep, just enough to hide what had been placed there. And the air that rose from it carried that same metallic scent, stronger now, mixed with dust, and something older, something sealed away. He reached down and brushed aside a thin layer of insulation, revealing the corner of something rigid, rectangular, not wood, not part of the house. His hand paused for a second, hovering, as a quiet thought crossed his mind. Not fear, not hesitation, but recognition, the kind that settles in before the truth fully forms. Rex let out a low breath behind him, not a growl this time, more like confirmation. Ethan exhaled slowly and gripped the object, pulling it free from the narrow space. It was a small metal box, matte gray, edges worn but not aged. This had not been here for decades. This had been placed here deliberately. Recently, he turned it in his hands, noticing the latch, simple but secure, no rust, no damage. Whoever put it here expected it to be opened again. For a moment, he just stared at it, kneeling there on the floor of a house that suddenly did not feel like his anymore. Memories flickered in pieces, conversations half remembered, Olivia standing in the kitchen with that distant look in her eyes, Daniel leaning against the counter too casually, the way they had exchanged glances that he had dismissed at the time. He had been tired then, worn down, trusting in a way that now felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else entirely. He shook the thought away and flipped the latch open. Inside were documents, neatly stacked, protected in plastic sleeves. The first page showed his name, Ethan Cole, printed clearly at the top, followed by numbers that did not match anything he remembered signing. His brow tightened as he scanned the lines: account transfers, property adjustments, authorizations that carried his signature but felt wrong. The strokes were slightly off, subtle enough to pass at a glance, but not to him. Not anymore. He turned another page, then another, each one building a pattern that settled heavier in his chest. This was not a mistake. This was design. Beneath the documents sat a small flash drive, black, unmarked, no branding, no label, just placed there like the final piece of something that had been carefully constructed. Ethan picked it up, rolling it between his fingers. The weight of it felt disproportionate to its size. Rex shifted closer again, his nose hovering inches from Ethan's hand, ears forward, alert, as if whatever lived inside that small device carried a scent he already understood. The house creaked softly around them, a faint settling sound that seemed louder now in the quiet. Ethan glanced back down the hallway, half expecting to see movement. But there was nothing, just the same dim lights stretching across the floor, the same silence that had greeted him when he walked in, except it did not feel empty anymore. It felt occupied by something unseen, something waiting for him to catch up to it. He pushed himself to his feet slowly, the box in one hand, the drive in the other, his mind already moving ahead, connecting pieces that had not made sense before. The speed of the divorce, the accounts drained before he could react, the way Olivia had avoided eye contact in those final days, the way Daniel had stepped in too easily, offering help that now felt rehearsed. Ethan looked down at Rex. The dog's gaze met his instantly, steady, unwavering. There was no confusion there, no doubt, just that quiet certainty that had carried them through places far worse than this. Ethan nodded once, almost to himself, the kind of small decision that does not need words. Whatever this was, whatever had been hidden beneath his own floor, it was not the end of what he lost. It was the beginning of understanding how it was taken. The sun had already dipped low by the time Ethan set the metal box on the old kitchen table, the light coming through the cracked window casting long shadows that stretched across the worn surface like fingers reaching for something just out of sight. Rex stayed close, pacing once before settling near the doorway, where he could see both Ethan and the hallway at the same time. Always watching, always listening. Ethan plugged the flash drive into an old laptop he had pulled from his duffel bag. The screen flickered to life slowly, the hum of the machine filling the quiet in a way that felt almost too loud. He hesitated for just a second before opening the files, not out of fear, but because some part of him already understood that whatever he was about to see would not give anything back. It would only take away whatever doubt he still had left. The first file was a recording, time-stamped weeks before the divorce had been finalized. The image showed his own living room, the one he had shared with Olivia, the camera angles slightly elevated, hidden, watching. He leaned closer, jaw tightening. The audio crackled softly before voices came through, clear enough to recognize instantly. Olivia first, her tone calm, measured, not the voice he remembered from their last arguments. but something colder, more deliberate. Then Daniel relaxed. Almost amused, they spoke about timelines, about signatures, about how long it would take before everything transferred cleanly. Ethan felt his chest rise slowly as he listened, not interrupting, not reacting, just absorbing each word like a man cataloging evidence instead of emotion. Rex shifted slightly, his ears twitching at the sound of Daniel's voice coming through the speakers, a low rumble building again in his chest, the same restrained warning he had given earlier. Ethan reached down without looking and rested his hand lightly against the dog's neck, grounding himself in something real, something that had not changed. The recording continued, Olivia mentioning his condition, the fatigue, the confusion, how easy it had been to get him to sign when he was not fully present. Daniel responded with quiet assurance, saying it was all temporary, that once the assets moved, there would be nothing left to contest, no proof, no way back. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, not to escape it, but to steady the rhythm of his breathing, because anger was not what he needed right now, clarity was. He opened the next file, this one shorter. A conversation in a car, Olivia again, her voice softer this time, almost uncertain, Daniel reassuring her, reminding her of what they would gain, the accounts, the property, the control over everything Ethan had built before things started falling apart. There was a pause in the audio, a moment where neither of them spoke, and in that silence Ethan heard something he had missed before. Hesitation, not regret, but awareness, as if even she understood the line they had crossed, and chose to step over it anyway. He leaned back in the chair slowly, the wood creaking beneath him, eyes fixed on the screen but not really seeing it anymore. The pieces had aligned now, not perfectly, but enough to remove the last illusion that this had been mutual, or fair, or anything close to accidental. It had been planned, carefully, patiently, executed while he was at his weakest, when his trust outweighed his caution, when he believed the people closest to him were still standing on the same side. Rex stood up suddenly, his body turning toward the hallway again, ears sharp, head slightly lowered. Ethan followed the movement, his focus shifting away from the laptop. The house responded with a faint sound, not loud, just a soft shift of wood somewhere deeper inside. The kind of noise an old place makes settling into itself. But now it felt different, like an echo of something disturbed. Ethan rose to his feet slowly, closing the laptop halfway but not shutting it, the glow from the screen casting a dim light across the room. He picked up the flash drive again, holding it between his fingers as if weighing what it meant, then slipped it into his pocket. Whatever this was, it was no longer just about what he had lost. It was about what had been hidden, and the quiet certainty settling inside him now was not anger, not grief, but purpose, the kind that does not shout, does not rush. It waits, steady and patient, just like the dog standing beside him, staring into the darkened hallway as if he already knew this was only the beginning. The hallway felt longer now, not in distance but in weight, like each step carried something unseen beneath it. Ethan moved forward slowly, not rushing, not hesitating, just listening. The old floor responded under his boots with soft creaks that echoed faintly into the silence ahead. Rex stayed half a step in front, his body angled slightly, guiding without looking back, his nose low, catching traces Ethan could not. The air shifted as they passed the doorway to the small spare room, colder. There, faint, but enough to notice if you paid attention, and Ethan always paid attention. He paused near the end of the hall where the wall met the back corner of the house, a place that should have been empty, just drywall and insulation behind it. Nothing worth hiding, nothing worth touching, but Rex stopped there, completely still, his ears forward, his gaze fixed not on the floor this time, but on the wall itself, a low breath leaving him, steady, controlled, the kind of signal he had given before, not urgency, not panic, but certainty. Ethan stepped closer, reaching out to press his palm lightly against the surface. The paint felt cooler here, smoother, newer. His fingers traced along the edge where the baseboard met the wall, and there it was again, that subtle difference, the line not perfectly aligned. The smallest shift that would have gone unnoticed by anyone who was not looking for it. But he was now. He had to be, because everything he thought he understood had already been proven wrong. He crouched down, examining the seam more closely, the faintest gap where the material had been removed and put back. carefully, but not perfectly. Rex shifted beside him, his nose brushing the edge once, then pulling back as if confirming what he already knew. Ethan exhaled slowly and stood, scanning the nearby room, his eyes landing on an old metal toolbox left behind near the kitchen entrance. He walked back, picked it up, and returned without a word, the weight of it familiar in his hands, grounding in a way that nothing else had been since he stepped into this house. He knelt again and worked the edge carefully, not forcing it, just enough pressure to test the resistance. The wall gave slightly, not enough to break, but enough to confirm it was not solid, not original. He adjusted his grip and tried again. A controlled movement, deliberate, the kind that came from years of doing things the right way the first time, and this time the panel shifted, just a fraction, then more, until a narrow section came loose, revealing darkness behind it. The smell was stronger here, not unpleasant, just out of place, clean and metallic, recent, like something that had not belonged to time. Ethan leaned in slightly, the dim light from the hallway stretching just far enough to outline shapes inside. Wires, small, thin, running along the inner frame, and something mounted behind them, compact, intentional, not part of the house at all. His brow tightened as the realization settled in. This was not just a place to hide things. This was a place to watch. Rex let out a soft exhale, stepping back once more, giving Ethan space, but not leaving, never leaving. Ethan reached in carefully, fingers brushing past the wires until he found the object secured behind them. He loosened it gently, mindful of how it had been placed, and pulled it free into the light. It was a small recording device, fitted with a lens no larger than a coin, angled outward, positioned perfectly to capture the hallway, the entrance, anyone moving through the house without ever knowing they were being seen. He turned it over in his hand, examining it. The casing was clean, no dust, no corrosion. This had been installed recently, maintained, used. His mind moved quickly now, connecting this with what he had already seen. The recordings on the drive, the conversations, the timing. None of it was random. None of it was rushed. It had been methodical, patient, built layer by layer while he believed he was still standing on solid ground. Ethan stood slowly, the device resting in his palm, and looked down the hallway toward the front of the house. The light had faded further now, shadows stretching longer, deeper, but the silence remained, steady, unchanged, as if the house itself was waiting for him to understand what it had been holding all along. He slipped the device into his pocket beside the flash drive, feeling the weight of both settle there, not heavy, but undeniable. And when he glanced down at Rex, the dog met his eyes with that same quiet certainty, no confusion, no doubt, just presence, the kind that does not question, does not leave. And in that moment Ethan understood something simple and clear. This was no longer about what had been taken from him. It was about what had been hidden around him. And the only reason he was seeing any of it now was because the one creature in this house had never stopped paying attention. The night settled in fully by the time Ethan returned to the kitchen, the last trace of daylight fading beyond the cracked window, leaving only the dim glow of the laptop screen and a single overhead bulb that flickered faintly, as if it could not decide whether to stay on or give in to the dark. Rex followed close, his movement quieter now, more deliberate, as though the house had shifted from something unfamiliar into something understood, and that understanding came with its own kind of tension. Ethan placed the recording device on the table beside the metal box and stared at it for a moment, not with confusion, but with a growing clarity that tightened everything inside his chest without ever raising his heartbeat. He reached for the laptop again, reopening it fully, the screen lighting his face in a pale blue hue that made the lines of fatigue more visible, more honest. He inserted the flash drive once more and navigated through the files, slower this time, more intentional, searching not for confirmation, but for connection. There was another folder he had not opened before, smaller, tucked beneath the recordings he had already seen. Its name nothing more than a string of numbers that meant nothing at first glance. But something about it felt deliberate, like it had been hidden in plain sight. He clicked it open. Inside were shorter clips, fragments, not full conversations, but pieces, moments captured without context. The first video loaded and the image resolved into something that made him lean forward without realizing it. It was this house, the same hallway, the same worn floorboards, but different, cleaner, recently disturbed, the camera angle matching the device he had just pulled from the wall, and in the frame stood Daniel, alone, moving with quiet precision, checking something along the baseboard, then stepping back, his posture relaxed, confident, like someone who knew exactly what he was doing and why. Ethan watched without blinking, his mind mapping the space, comparing it to what stood around him now, the small imperfections, the places where things had been altered and returned, every detail lining up with what he had already uncovered. This was not a one-time act. This had been repeated, adjusted, maintained. The next clip showed Olivia, standing near the kitchen entrance, her arms folded, her expression unreadable at first, until she turned slightly, and the light caught her face just enough to reveal something he had never seen before. Not anger, not sadness, but distance, like she had already stepped away from everything they had built together long before the papers were ever signed. Daniel said something off camera, the audio too low to catch clearly, but her response came through, soft, controlled. "Just make sure it is done before he gets back," she said, and even in the quiet of that sentence there was no hesitation, no doubt, only decision. Ethan leaned back slowly, the chair creaking beneath him, his eyes still fixed on the screen but his thoughts already moving beyond it. This had not started at the end. It had been in motion long before anything felt wrong, before the arguments, before the distance, before the nights he could not remember clearly because exhaustion had taken too much from him to notice what was changing right in front of him. Rex shifted again, moving to the side of the table, his head lifting slightly, ears angling toward the front of the house. Ethan followed the motion instinctively, listening, the faint sound of wind brushing against the siding, the distant creak of something outside settling into the cooler night air. Nothing unusual, nothing immediate, but still, Rex did not relax, and that alone was enough to keep Ethan grounded in the present, not lost in what had already been revealed. He reached down and closed the laptop gently, not shutting it completely, just enough to darken the screen. The room fell quieter without its glow, the overhead light humming softly above them, casting long shadows that stretched toward the hallway once more. Ethan placed both hands on the table and stood. The pieces were no longer scattered. They were aligned now, not perfectly, but enough to see the shape of what had been done, and more importantly, how it had been done. He picked up the small recording device again, turning it over in his hand, then looked down at Rex. The dog met his gaze without hesitation, steady, present, unchanged. And in that silent exchange there was something stronger than any evidence sitting on that table, something that had not been manipulated, not been hidden, not been taken. Ethan nodded once, slow and certain. Whatever came next would not be rushed, would not be careless, because this time he was not walking into something blind. This time he was seeing it clearly, step by step, just like the dog who had never stopped watching even when he had. Sleep did not come easily, not because of fear, but because the mind refused to slow down once it finally understood what it had been missing. Ethan sat in the old chair by the window long after the house had gone still, the metal box, the flash drive, and the small recording device laid out on the table behind him like quiet witnesses, the night air pressed lightly against the glass, carrying the distant hum of open land stretching miles beyond the property, empty and indifferent, the kind of silence that usually brought him peace, but not tonight. Tonight it sharpened everything. Rex lay near the doorway at first, head down but eyes open, watching, always watching, every small shift in the air caught in the subtle movement of his ears, until something changed, not outside, not loud, just a faint rhythm that did not belong to wind or settling wood, a presence more than a sound, the kind that existed just at the edge of awareness. Rex lifted his head slowly, body tensing without rising, his gaze fixed toward the front of the house. Ethan noticed it immediately, the shift, the same one he had seen earlier, controlled, focused, never wasted. He stood without a word, moving toward the hallway again, slower this time, more deliberate, the floor beneath him familiar now in a way it had not been before. Each creak mapped, each uneven board remembered. Rex moved ahead of him, silent, guiding once more, stopping near the front room where the main entrance sat. The door itself closed, locked, unchanged, but the air around it felt different, cooler, carrying a faint trace of something recent, something that had passed through not long ago. Ethan's hand hovered near the handle but did not touch it. Instead, he crouched slightly, eyes scanning the base of the door, the frame, the floor just inside. There it was, barely visible. A thin line of disturbed dust, subtle, but new. Not from days ago, not from his own arrival. This had happened after. Rex let out a quiet breath, stepping closer to the door, nose near the gap, drawing in the scent, then pulling back, his posture tightening just enough to confirm what Ethan already felt, building in his chest. He straightened slowly, not rushing, not reacting, just absorbing. The timeline shifted in his mind. The recordings, the hidden devices, the careful planning, and now this. Someone had come back, not to take, not to confront, but to check, to see if what they had left behind was still undisturbed, still hidden, still safe. Ethan turned slightly, his eyes moving through the room, measuring distance, entry points, the placement of everything as it stood now. Nothing out of place at first glance, but that no longer meant anything, because he had already seen how easily something could exist right in front of him without being noticed. Rex remained by the door, his body angled, ready but not aggressive, waiting, always waiting. Ethan stepped back toward the table and picked up the small recording device, weighing it again in his hand, then glanced toward the laptop, still half open, the faint glow now barely visible. A thought formed, quiet, precise, not rushed, not emotional, just clear. He moved with purpose now, setting the device back on the table, adjusting its position slightly, angling it toward the hallway, toward the entrance, toward the exact path someone would take if they returned again, his movements careful, natural, leaving nothing obvious, nothing forced, just enough to observe without being seen, the same way it had been done to him. He closed the laptop fully this time, the room falling into deeper darkness, only the overhead light remaining. Humming softly, Ethan walked back to the doorway and stood beside Rex, resting a hand lightly against the dog's shoulder, grounding, steady, the two of them facing the same direction, the same unknown, but not unprepared. Outside, the wind shifted again, brushing against the siding with a low, steady sound, and somewhere beyond the property line, something moved, not close enough to see, not loud enough to confirm, but enough for Rex to lift his head slightly higher, eyes narrowing into the dark. Ethan did not follow the movement with his eyes. He did not need to, because for the first time since stepping into this house, he was not reacting to what had already happened. He was ready for what might come next. And that quiet shift, that subtle change from being the one who was watched to the one who was now watching back, settled into him with a calm that felt almost unfamiliar, but solid, real, and standing there beside the one creature who had never been fooled, never been distracted, never been blind. Ethan understood something simple. The truth had not just been hidden in this house. It had been waiting, and now it was no longer alone. The hours stretched quietly, not empty, but filled with a kind of waiting that did not demand movement. Ethan did not sit this time. He remained near the hallway, leaning slightly against the wall where he could see both the front door and the path. Leading back toward the kitchen, the overhead light cast a steady glow now, no longer flickering, as if the house itself had settled into whatever this moment was becoming. Rex stayed beside him, not lying down, not pacing, just standing, weight balanced, ears shifting subtly, with every faint sound carried through the structure. Neither of them spoke, neither of them needed to. Time passed in small, measured pieces, the kind that only feels slow when you are aware of every second, and then it came again. That same subtle disruption, not a knock, not a voice, just a presence moving near the edge of the property, distant but deliberate. Rex reacted first, his body tightening, head turning slightly toward the front window, not the door this time. The window. Ethan followed, stepping carefully across the floor, avoiding the boards he knew would speak under pressure, his hand resting lightly against the frame as he leaned just enough to see through the glass without revealing himself. The outside was mostly dark, the moon hidden behind thin clouds that turned the sky into a dull gray canvas. The yard stretched out in muted shapes, fence posts, low brush, the outline of the old shed near the back, and then movement, not fast, not obvious, but there, a figure passing between the shadows near the far edge, just inside the property line, pausing, then shifting again as if unsure how close to come. Ethan did not react outwardly. His breathing stayed even, his posture unchanged, but his focus narrowed, every detail pulling into place, the height, the movement, the hesitation. This was not someone lost, not someone passing through. This was someone checking, confirming, exactly as he had suspected, exactly as the signs had pointed to. Rex let out the faintest breath, barely audible, but enough, his body leaning forward a fraction, ready, but waiting, always waiting for Ethan, always aligned. The figure outside moved closer, step by step, not toward the door, but along the side of the house, tracing the wall like someone who already knew the layout, knew where to stand, where not to be seen. Ethan shifted his position slightly, stepping back from the window before the angle could reveal him, his mind already moving ahead, not to confrontation, not to reaction, but to control. This was no longer about discovering what had happened. It was about letting the truth reveal itself fully, without interference, without warning. He turned his head slightly toward the table behind him, where the small recording device now sat positioned exactly where it needed to be, angled, quiet, waiting, the same way everything had been set before, except this time, it was his. The faint sound of something brushing against the exterior wall reached them, soft, deliberate, followed by a pause. Then another step, closer now, closer to the door. Rex's ears angled forward sharply. His body still held in perfect control. No bark, no sudden movement. Just presence, the kind that had never failed him before. Ethan stepped into the shadow beside the hallway entrance, out of direct view of the doorway, not hiding in fear, but positioning, his breathing steady, his hands relaxed at his sides, nothing forced, nothing rushed, just waiting for the moment to unfold on its own. The handle of the front door shifted slightly, not enough to open, just enough to test, a quiet pressure that confirmed everything. The person on the other side knew the door, knew the lock, knew exactly what they were doing. Ethan's gaze remained fixed, unblinking, not angry, not surprised, just certain now, completely certain, the final piece settling into place without resistance. Rex took one silent step forward, placing himself just ahead of Ethan, not blocking, not lunging, just standing there, a line drawn without sound, without threat, and in that stillness, that quiet tension where nothing had happened yet, but everything had already been decided, Ethan understood something deeper than proof, deeper than betrayal. This was no longer about what they had taken. It was about the moment they realized he was no longer the man they thought they had left behind. The pressure on the door handle lingered for a second longer, just enough to confirm intention, then it eased back. Not abruptly, not startled, but controlled. Whoever stood on the other side was thinking, adjusting, realizing something did not feel the same as before. Ethan did not move, did not step forward. He stayed exactly where he was, letting the silence hold its shape, letting the moment stretch without interference. Because this was no longer about catching someone in the act, it was about letting them reveal themselves fully, without resistance. Rex remained still, his body aligned with the door, his ears forward, eyes fixed, not on the handle, but beyond it, as if he could already see through the wood, already understand what stood on the other side. The kind of awareness that did not come from training alone, but from something deeper, something earned through years of watching, waiting, and never being wrong. Outside, the faint sound of a step shifted across the porch, soft, deliberate, followed by another pause. Then the slightest creak of weight settling near the window, not the front one, but the side, the same path Ethan had seen earlier, the same pattern, cautious, familiar, practiced. Ethan turned his head just enough to acknowledge the movement, his posture unchanged, his breathing steady. He knew this was the moment, not for confrontation, but for confirmation, for the final layer to unfold without him forcing it. The shadow passed briefly across the thin curtain covering the side window, a silhouette barely visible, but enough, the outline of a shoulder, the tilt of a head, someone looking in, not expecting to be seen, not expecting to be watched back. Rex shifted one step, silent, his body angling slightly toward that direction, not breaking position, just adjusting, always adjusting. Ethan stepped away from the hallway slowly, not toward the door, but toward the kitchen, each movement measured, quiet, natural. as if he had nothing to hide, as if he was exactly where he belonged, because now he reached the table and rested his hand lightly near the recording device, not touching it, not adjusting it further, just acknowledging its presence, its purpose. Then he turned slightly, allowing just enough light from the overhead bulb to spill into the hallway, into the line of sight of anyone peering through that side window. Outside, the figure paused again, longer this time, the stillness stretching as if a decision was being made, approach or retreat, continue or leave, and in that hesitation, everything Ethan needed was already there, not in words, not in action, but in behavior, in the way the person moved, in the way they stopped, in the way they did not expect resistance, did not expect awareness. Rex let out a low breath, almost inaudible, but steady, his presence unwavering, his stance unchanged, and that was enough, more than enough. The sound of a step retreating came next, faint, careful, followed by another, then another, moving away from the house, back toward the edge of the property where the shadows were deeper and the shapes less defined. Ethan did not follow, did not rush to the window, did not break the stillness he had built, because the purpose had already been fulfilled, the presence had been confirmed, the pattern had been completed, and more importantly, it had been captured, not just in the device sitting quietly on the table, but in his understanding, in the clarity that now settled fully into place. He exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing not because the danger had passed, but because the unknown had become known, and that changed everything. Rex turned his head slightly, looking back at Ethan for the first time since the movement began, their eyes meeting in that quiet space between action and stillness. And in that look there was no question, no uncertainty, only the same steady connection that had carried them through everything before, the same silent agreement that whatever came next would be faced together, without hesitation, without doubt. Ethan nodded once, subtle, controlled, then stepped back into the center of the room, the house around them settling again into its quiet rhythm. But it was not the same silence as before. It was no longer empty, no longer passive. It was aware now, just like he was, and just like the one creature beside him who had seen it long before he had. The truth was no longer hidden. It was moving, and this time, it would not be allowed to disappear again. Morning came without ceremony, just a gradual softening of the darkness through the thin kitchen window, the kind of light that did not demand attention, but quietly replaced what had been there before. Ethan stood where he had been for most of the night, not out of restlessness, but because there was nothing left to chase, nothing left to guess. The pieces had settled into place, and now, it was simply a matter of letting them exist as they were, complete and undeniable. Rex lay near the doorway now, finally at ease but not asleep, his body relaxed yet aware, the tension that had held him through the night easing into something steadier, something grounded, his eyes half open, tracking Ethan without needing to move, always present, always close. Ethan walked slowly to the table, the metal box still there, the laptop closed, the small recording device exactly where he had left it, untouched, unchanged, but no longer passive. He reached for it and lifted it carefully, turning it in his hand as the early light caught its surface. For a moment, he just held it, not rushing to check, not driven by urgency, because whatever it contained now was not a question, it was confirmation. He set it down again and opened the laptop, the screen flickering awake, the quiet hum returning to the room, grounding, familiar. He inserted the device and waited, eyes steady, breath even, as the files loaded one by one. And there it was, the footage from the night, clear, unbroken, the hallway, the door, the movement outside, the hesitation, the test of the handle, the shift to the window. Every step captured without interruption, without distortion, not dramatic, not chaotic, just real. Exactly as it had happened, exactly as it had been allowed to happen. Ethan watched it through once, then again, not searching for emotion, not reliving the moment, but studying it, the posture, the timing, the familiarity in the way the figure moved along the wall, the way it knew where to stand, where to look, the way it paused not out of fear, but out of calculation, and that was enough, more than enough, because it aligned with everything else, the recordings, the hidden devices, the documents. It was no longer a story he was piecing together, it was a pattern that had already revealed itself. Rex rose slowly and stepped closer, standing beside him, his gaze fixed on the screen, not reacting, not questioning, just observing, as if even now he understood that this was the final step, not in action, but in clarity. Ethan closed the laptop gently and sat down for the first time since the night had begun, the chair creaking softly beneath him. He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees, looking out through the window as the light continued to grow, stretching across the yard, touching the fence line, the shed, the open land beyond. Everything the same as it had been before, and yet completely different now, because he was no longer standing in it unaware. He did not reach for his phone, did not rush to call anyone, did not move to confront or accuse, because that was not what this moment required. What it required was patience, the same patience that had been used against him, now turned in the opposite direction, steady, controlled, inevitable. He reached down and rested his hand against Rex's back, fingers pressing lightly into the thick fur, feeling the warmth, the quiet strength that had never wavered, never shifted, even when everything else had. Rex did not move, did not turn. He simply stayed, grounded in a way that did not need explanation. Ethan exhaled slowly, the tension that had built over the past days not disappearing, but settling into something more focused, more defined, not anger, not grief, but resolve, the kind that does not announce itself, does not rush ahead. It waits, it watches, and when the moment comes, it moves with certainty. Outside, the wind moved gently across the field, carrying the scent of earth and distance, the same as it always had, but now it felt different, not empty, not indifferent, but open, like something had been cleared away that no longer needed to remain. Ethan looked down at Rex once more, a small nod passing between them without words, and in that quiet exchange there was something simple and unshakable. Not everything that is taken is lost, and not every truth needs to be chased. Sometimes it waits, patient and silent, until someone is ready to see it, and sometimes it arrives on 4 steady paws and refuses to let you look away.